Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening.
Hold one, Andre.
You're not good at this. Get out. Let me tell you a personal story about Vince McMahon.
You just made the list.
Oh my God.
Sorry, no speak English.
Dummy. Goodbye and good night. Hold two, on bar.
It's still real to me, damn it.
Dummy.
This is the worst town I've ever been in.
Hold three, Lamas covered. Three-handle family Gradunzel.
Mamma mia.
And now, Unchained.media presents the B Plus Podcast with your host, Greg Unchained.
It's me, Austin. It was me all along, Austin.
Number 4, armbar.
I will never retire.
I still got 200 more. I got 200 more holes to list.
All right, fellow B Plus players, welcome to the B Plus Podcast. I am your host, Greg Unchained. Today is Friday. You know what that means. It's Aussie Grapps Day. It's our favourite day of the week where we sit down, we take a look at the world of Australian professional wrestling. I'm going to run you down the biggest headlines, at least as I see them. Obviously, I don't get to see everything, and sometimes things will fly under the radar. I used to do lots of match announcements and things like that, but there's so much going on in Aussie wrestling at the moment as we lead up to a big weekend in November, and lots of people having lots of shows. It's a fantastic thing for the scene, but unfortunately it means that it's not really practical for me to cover everything that's happening from a match announcement standpoint, from a story perspective. So I'm just going to give you the dot points and major headlines. I also like to sit down and talk to an Aussie Grappler each week. I'm changing it up this week. I'm changing it up. It's not just Aussie Grapplers anymore. It's open to anyone involved in the world of Aussie Grappling. And the person I sat down to talk to this week is someone whose work I thoroughly enjoy. She runs Bronco Busters. Erin Dick, of course, I am speaking about. One of the best pro wrestling journalists that we have in Australia, and it was really nice to sit down and talk to her. What started as an interview kind of just became a chat, and it was really nice to get to know Erin. So stick around for that, and then after the interview, I will, of course, let you know what is happening in your neighbourhood this weekend. I'll run down all the shows happening across Australia that I know of this weekend, and tell you where you can find tickets and all that sort of stuff. But first, let's take a look at this week in Aussie Grapps news. Top story for me this week coming out of Japan, and no, it's not Robbie Eagles. I am speaking, of course, of the retirement of Hartley Jackson, a legend of Australian professional wrestling, very heavily involved with TMDK, with Perth wrestling in general, and just Australian wrestling in general. He's one of those guys who really carried the torch through the early mid-2000s and right up until recently, and was a standard bearer for Australian professional wrestling. His work at various training schools across the country really lifted the entire talent level of the country. Hartley Jackson, thank you for everything you have done for Aussie Grapps. You've been killing it over in Japan lately for 01. And then he posted a image on Instagram this week with the following caption. It says that this photo is from my last moments as a pro wrestler, not knowing if my body would let me stand tall to thank you all for the decades of support. This was after my final match in 01 Japan. My legs were shot, my lower back was dead, so at that moment, after 20 years of wrestling and running on a broken body, I decided to go out on my terms. And there couldn't have been a more perfect place than at Korakuen Hall, after a match where I laid it all on the line. Japan has always been my second home, and I will miss it way too much. The fans are incredible, and to Australia, I'm sorry I couldn't give you one more. From not so humble beginnings in 1998 to a small NJPW young lion in 2006, to a heavyweight beast from 2008 to 2018 with WrestleRampage and 01, I've had the best experiences of my life. I feel in my heart that one day I will be back, competing in the ring, though first, I need to put some pieces back together in this old hoss body so I can try and be bigger and better than before. But for now, I must say, goodbye. So that's Hartley Jackson's little retirement speech, I guess, or retirement post. And yeah, the little bit at the end gives me hope. You know, he feels in his heart one day he's going to be back. He does want to compete in the ring again. So hopefully this isn't goodbye so much as see you later. But at least for now, it's goodbye. Hopefully, Hartley, hopefully we do get to get one more here in Australia. But, you know, only if you're able. Only if you're able. The Aussie Grapps community thanks you for everything you've done, obviously. An absolute legend of the game. Hearts off to Hartley Jackson, for everything he's done. Moving on, we of course have had... I mentioned off the top of the show that there's been a lot of match announcements and what have you. Now, the last few weeks have seen World Series Wrestling starting to roll out announcements, so I'm not going to go through every single one. Once again, it's a matter of time. I don't have the time to necessarily list off every single amazing match that we can expect. But we already know the lineup for World Series Wrestling is incredible. It combines the best in the world with the best in Australia and lets them go at it, and it's very exciting. Now, most of the tickets, I know Sydney is completely sold out. Melbourne is very close to sold out, only a handful of tickets left. Perth still has a ways to go. So Perth, Gavin McGavin told you, I have told you repeatedly, listen to your champion. He's your champion for a reason. He knows what he's talking about. Get out there and buy some tickets. Support some Aussie Grapps. Look at some of the matches you are getting. Marty Scurll versus Damian Slater. Cody versus Volta could headline anywhere in the world. Cody is unfortunately no longer NWA World Champion. He is still IWGP US Champion though. And I don't know if IWGP are going to sanction this as a title match or what, but Volta versus Cody, that headlines anywhere in the world, and this show isn't sold out. Come on, Perth, pick up your game. We're also getting across the country matches like Marty Scurll versus Adam Brooks versus Volta as well for the first time ever. Those two obviously work in similar circles. When Brooksy was over in England, Revolution Pro, Volta makes a home there sometimes, and in PWG as well. That's kind of Volta's American home. It's also Brooksy's American home. But the first time they're ever going to meet is right here in Australia. That one's in Melbourne on night 2. One that piqued my interest a lot is Brandy Rhodes versus Indy Hartwell versus Erica Reed in Melbourne on night 1. Seriously, these cards are looking fantastic. Volta versus Bonza in Sydney. Bonza! And everyone... Okay, so many comments being like, Bonza's chest is going to match his ring gear, because he wears red, of course, and Volta is known for his chops, his huge, thudding, chest caving in chops. But don't worry about Bonza, man. Worry about Volta. Seriously, worry about Volta. He's in there with Bonza. An absolute general, a technician, a bully. He's going to take him down. Mark my words. It's going to be impressive. Bonza versus Volta. That's definitely one to keep an eye out for. So yeah, so if you haven't got tickets to World Series Wrestling, act now, especially if you're in Perth. Come on, Perth. Adelaide don't get a show this time. I don't know why Adelaide don't get a show this time, but Adelaide don't get a show this time. And so, you need to pick up your game and you need to sell those tickets, Perth. I'm keeping my eye on you. Do us proud. It's also been a really big week this week for online video releases. So, all at once, pretty much, Melbourne City Wrestling have released New Horizons on Vimeo. That's the show that I have raved about since the Super Showdown weekend. It was the show that took place the night before Super Showdown. Hottest live crowd I've ever been a part of. Fantastic matches like Lockie Hendricks and Dowie James, Robbie Eagles and Gino Gambino, Adam Brooks and Slex, Indy Hartwell and Shazza McKenzie, Avery and Kellyanne. There was not a bad match on this card. I feel sorry for the people that I didn't mention because I've left names out, but there was not a bad match on this card. You need to watch it. It was a really well-paced show. I watched it back on demand. I barely watched any of the stuff I was supposed to watch this week when I was preparing for my This Month in BritRes podcast and other such things that I do on the side. I got so caught up in the amount of Aussie releases we had this week. So MCW New Horizons launched as well. MCW on the Encore service. This is seriously such a good service, you guys. I think I pay $8 a month for this on Vimeo, and I get a notification when the video comes live. Whenever they add something, I get the notification. And they also uploaded Glow in Real Life. That was the women's only event that took place at Evie's Disco Diner. It's one of those shows that there's no commentary or anything of the like. It's just a show as it is, as it was, if you were there in the crowd. And there were some really good matches on that one. It's definitely one to keep an eye on. Glow Part 2, of course, has been announced. There is a second show taking place at Evie's Disco Diner. That one happens in Melbourne on November 25th. That's my birthday. if anyone wants to fly me out for my birthday so I can come out and check out Glow in Real Life with Tessa Blanchard. Tessa Blanchard is going to be a part of a women's only wrestling event in Melbourne, and that's the day after Night 1 and Night 2 of World Series Wrestling. So you're going to see Cody, Brandy Rhodes, Marty Scurll, Flip Gordon, Austin Aries, Brian Cage, Volta, Jonah Rock, Adam Brooks, Robbie Eagles, everyone at World Series Wrestling on Night 1 and Night 2. And then as you're nursing your insane wrestling hangover, you get to go out, have lunch at Evie's Disco Diner, right? Have lunch at Evie's Disco Diner. Watch out for Kellyanne. Don't let her steal your potato gems. You're going to have lunch at the diner there. If you watched Glow in Real Life #1, you would understand what I'm talking about. But you're going to get to, have a feed and sit ringside as you watch Tessa Blanchard tear it up in the ring with some of Australia's finest women workers at a women's only wrestling show on the Sunday, 25th of November. What a fantastic package that weekend is for you guys in Melbourne. You guys in Melbourne, I am incredibly jealous of your wrestling. I'm not jealous of anything else about Melbourne. We talked about this. If you want to hear what we think about Melbourne, listen to the Super Show Dash Down Spectacular episode 100. It's definitely a matter of the wrestling in Melbourne makes me want to live in Melbourne. Nothing else. The wrestling. Holy crap, you guys are spoiled. Spoiled in Melbourne. And this weekend in November, my birthday weekend, is a perfect example of just how spoiled you are. But that's not all. Melbourne City Wrestling didn't stop there. I kind of went off on a tangent there about the Glow announcement, but they uploaded New Horizons, they uploaded Glow in Real Life, but they didn't stop there. They also got WrestleRock 25 WrestleBrunch from the day of the Super Show Dash Down in Melbourne. I was there at the WrestleBrunch. It was a hilarious show. A lot of people there did not know what to expect. I haven't gotten a chance to watch this one yet. I watched New Horizons, I watched Glow in Real Life, but WrestleBrunch I only got the notification at about 2 a.m. this morning. So I haven't watched WrestleBrunch yet, but I'm very curious to see how it comes across on camera with some of the crowd reactions. Should be really good to see. So Melbourne City Wrestling, the production department of Melbourne City Wrestling are, fantastic. It's no secret here that they're fantastic. And they've worked really hard this week and last week to get these shows. They've had a lot on their plate and they've worked really hard to get these shows out there for the world. And now you can watch them. $8 a month. And I mean, look, just this week you got 3 shows. Right? Now, it's not going to be like that every week, of course, but there's a huge back catalogue. Definitely get onto Encore On Demand. It's also available on Pivot Share if you prefer that service. I personally am a Vimeo guy. But yeah, Vimeo On Demand or Pivot Share, MCW Encore. You need to get on there and check out some of Australia's greatest wrestling. Also this week, released on Vimeo, WrestleRampage Ground Zero. This one's only going to cost you, I think it's like $4 to rent, $10 to purchase. Don't quote me on that. I should have it in front of me, but I'm terrible at my job. Ground Zero on Vimeo, fantastic night of action that I unfortunately missed since I was down with a stomach bug, so it was great to be able to catch up on that one. Great, once again, great matches top to bottom. Australia is really stepping it up at the moment. Specific standouts on this one, Jonah Rock vs. Rat Daddy, and the ensuing clustermuck that happened after that. We'll talk about that in the build-up to the next event. Tommy Knight and Kyle Fletcher. This one you can actually check out. If you're like, I'm not sure about WrestleRampage, I'm not sure about going on Vimeo and spending $10 of my hard-earned dollars, that's fine. That's fine. It's your money, right? I completely understand the caution of not wanting to jump into a product you have not yet seen. I completely understand that. But worry not. Fear not, dear B+ player, because Tommy Knight vs. Kyle Fletcher, one of the standout matches from this show, is available on YouTube. I will drop a link in the show notes. Tommy Knight is someone that I have talked about previously on this show when we did Iron Fist and all of those sorts of things. Tommy Knight is one to watch, man. He has not been doing this for a very long time. And, there's names on people's lips, right? Ricky South has not been doing this for a long time, but he's fantastic. He's brilliant. He's one of the B+ favorites. No one questions that. Matty Wahlberg, another guy who has not been doing this long, but just gets it and is fantastic at what he does already and is going to grow in leaps and bounds. Like, we have a new class of wrestlers in this country that are just super young, super hungry, and getting it so quickly. And Tommy Knight is one of those guys. This guy is an absolute hoss, and you want to get in on the ground floor with Tommy Knight. He is called the Prodigy for a reason. And of course, Kyle Fletcher, standing across the ring from him. Kyle Fletcher, grizzled young vet. I shouldn't say grizzled young vet. That's a different team. Aussie Open, the Aussie Arrow, Kyle Fletcher. 6-year pro at 19 years old. Like, what's going on? And he's across the ring from Tommy Knight, and this match is brilliant. You need to check it out. It's up on YouTube. I'll drop a link in the show notes. And then, of course, once you see that and realize, hey, this WrestleRampage place is pretty good, you're also going to get AJ Istria and Damian Slater. Rat Daddy, that's right, Rat Daddy, you got to see it to understand it, takes on Jonah Rock. You need to watch this show. It's only $10. Stop being a stooge. Pay for good Aussie Grapps. Support Aussie Grapps. It's what we're about here. But it doesn't stop there. Australian wrestling is hot right now. PWA Colosseum. This only took place last weekend, and they got this turned around in like a matter of 4 or 5 days. It released 2 days ago. I didn't get to watch it until yesterday. Yesterday being Wednesday for me as I record this. But PWA Colosseum. What a show. What a fantastic show. Once again, top to bottom, really good action. Could not pick a bad match if you asked me to. Why would you ask me to do that? That's a terrible thing to ask. Once again, we get a free match on YouTube. So if you're unsure about whether or not you should plop down the $8 or $9 for PWAplay.com, go to YouTube. I'll drop the link in the show notes. Kyle Fletcher vs. Unsocial Jordan is free on YouTube. That's the first match of the show. First match of the night, and it tears the house down. You can only imagine how the rest of the night's going to go when that's the opener. They went back through the curtain. They were like, follow that, boys. So it's definitely one, you don't want to miss this show. And again, PWA Play, similar to MCW Encore, it's really good value for money because you're not just going to get PWA, you're also going to get Nui Pro with their 7th anniversary show coming up this weekend. That's going to get turned around pretty quickly and put up on the service as well. You got to imagine you can go back and watch the Nui Pro Rumble. Newcastle Pro Wrestling and PWA are consistently putting out some of the best wrestling in not just New South Wales, but in Australia. And they are, leaders in the Aussie Grapps community. So it's definitely one that you want to get on and check out. The Colosseum show, of course. Paris de Giff, as Mick Moretti calls him, Paris de Giff has done it again with that crazy on-the-shoulders DDT for Ricky South. Ricky South, who stepped up last minute to fill in for Kellyanne when she couldn't make it on a flight. Please go back and listen to our PWA Colosseum review and recap podcast. We sat down, we talked to Matty Wahlberg about why he did what he did after the match. You can catch the show on Colosseum, then listen to our recap, listen to why Matty Wahlberg did what he did, what he thinks and what he's got planned coming up for their next show. PWA, Friday is for the babes, Friday, December 7th. After talking to Matty Wahlberg, I'm trying to book flights. I'm trying to head up that way to catch the show. We're going to see what we can do about this party situation. He says it's going to be a party. Well, it's not a party without the B+. Just putting that out there. It's not a party without the B+. So I'm trying to fly up to Sydney to join some of my co-hosts like Jay and CJ and Mikey at this PWA event. I'll let you know how we go as we get closer. But for now, what you need to do is check out Kyle Fletcher vs. Unsocial Jordan on YouTube. Really smart work by PWA and WrestleRampage both to put the Kyle Fletcher matches first and foremost on Front Street. A lot of the UK BritRes Eurograps community are going to love that. So being able to see more Kyle Fletcher is always good. So putting those matches up for free and then being like, hey, by the way, you can watch more of this. You need to watch more of this. PWAplay.com, PWA Colosseum is out and you need to watch it. Also in PWA news this week, it was announced that PWA will have a match on WrestleMania weekend as part of the Powerbomb TV special. So Powerbomb TV is another one of these streaming networks, similar to Power Slam Network, which I watch on the iPad, which has a lot of good ones on it. Powerbomb TV focuses more on live streaming than it does archived content. But, of course, everything they stream does get archived as well, as far as I know. And it looks like on WrestleMania weekend, they're having a big special where they're inviting a bunch of companies to put on marquee matches for this Powerbomb TV special. PWA have been invited and accepted the invitation. No word on what the match is yet. You got to think potentially Mick Moretti could be involved. Mick Moretti is doing a lot of stuff over there at the moment with Chikara, Beyond Wrestling. I think he made his debut there. So it definitely Mick Moretti may be one to look out for here. Robbie Eagles with his stuff going on in New Japan. I haven't even touched on that. That's how big this week has been in Aussie wrestling, that Robbie Eagles tearing things up in New Japan has barely made the list. But Robbie Eagles, you got to think he might be on the list of people to show up in this match. Madison Eagles, obviously, all of the Shimmer girls, they could be over there representing Shimmer on this weekend as well. So no word yet on who the match is going to be, but PWA are going to have a match on the Powerbomb special on WrestleMania weekend. Fantastic news for PWA, fantastic news for Australian wrestling. PWA, just keep killing it, and I'm very excited to see where things go in 2019 as we kind of start to close out 2018 now, and looking forward to the future. PWA WrestleMania weekend, that's very exciting. Now, another match that I want to shout out, so like I said, I'm not going to do a bunch of match announcements, but this one really piqued my interest. SPW which is a company that doesn't get enough love. IPW and SPW over in New Zealand don't get enough love from us, and I apologize. If you live in New Zealand and you listen to this show and you're like, hey, why aren't they talking more about New Zealand? That was terrible, and I apologize for that. Contact me, let me know, because I need sort of more eyes. I need some eyes on the ground over in New Zealand. I try to follow as much as I can, and I'm on the SPW on demand, so I do watch shows when they come up in post, but sometimes I don't notice. Like, I've got the follow on Facebook, man. The Facebook settings confuse me. I've got them set as see first, but I still never see any posts for them unless I search them out, and sometimes when I'm going through my lists and everything, I just forget to search it out, and I apologize for this, because I love SPW, and I'm really happy to see the Hooligan Marcus Cool and JK Moody both just tearing it up over here at the moment when they come over for shows like they have with MCW, with PWA. You know, I'm really happy for SPW and all the success that they're having. The Rumble show was one of the best shows in the Aussie Grapps community. I count New Zealand as part of Aussie Grapps, so I really should cover them more. But this weekend, Adam Brooks is defending the MCW Intercommonwealth Championship against JK Moody in SPW at their Halloween show this weekend. Very exciting. Potential ramifications for MCW Endgame. If Adam Brooks loses this match, JK Moody is going to walk into Endgame as the Intercommonwealth Championship for that rematch with Slex. Maybe it'll become a triple threat if that happens. Who knows? But the title is on the line this weekend at SPW. So if you're a Melbourne City Wrestling fan, you need to get on SPW. You need to follow them on Facebook. You need to follow the B+. We'll keep you informed of what's going on. We've slacked off with the results lately because we've got big things coming in 2019. So we're kind of, the website's had to take a backseat just for time issues at the moment as we build. But looking forward, keep your eye on the B+, and keep your eye, of course, on SPW's Facebook, because your boy Adam Brooks is going over there, and he may lose your title, your MCW Intercommonwealth title. If you're an MCW fan, you need to be following SPW right now, because it could have big ramifications for November 17. So I've talked a bit about the Tommy Knight Carl Fletcher match, the Unsocial Jordan Carl Fletcher match that are up on YouTube for free, but another match went up on YouTube this week that was absolutely incredible. I was super stoked that this went up, because when I heard about it, I was like, I really need to see this match. Dowie James versus Kellyanne for Adrenaline Pro Wrestling. It was... people who know me know I'm a big fan of chain wrestling, of grappling, of wrestling. And Dowie and Kellyanne just did an incredible job. This match was fantastic. I cannot recommend it highly enough. I'm going to put the link in the show notes, as I do. I had a chance to talk to Dowie James. If you go back in the archives, I have an interview with Dowie James. He's got to be one of the nicest people I've ever spoken to. Saw him at the Melbourne City Wrestling Show while I was in Melbourne as well, and at WrestleRock. He's just an all-round fantastic dude. And I want to give him an extra special shout out this week for his Twitter, at Dowie James. Give it a follow. He has been, much like I have been on the podcast, much like the On the Turnbuckle Boys have been on Twitter and Facebook and on the podcast as well, and also my guest this week, Erin Dick of Bronco Busters. Dowie has been very vocally opposed to Crown Jewel taking place in Saudi Arabia, and as well the sort of the hypocrisy there with the Evolution event taking place a couple of days before. And his Twitter is just a goldmine, and he is just and I just wanted to give that a shout out. So not just for Dowie either, for Dowie, the On the Turnbuckle Boys, and Erin Dick of Bronco Busters, because so that's Easy Tweener. It's really, really good to see. Vocal opposition is super important. Vocal opposition to, injustice is super important. It's something that, I toyed with whether or not to be as vocal as I have been about the Saudi Arabia thing and the hashtag fuck Saudi Arabia, hashtag cancel Crown Jewel, all that sort of stuff. I've had to make it very clear on multiple times. I'm not talking about Saudi Arabians, I'm talking about the regime, etc., etc. You've probably heard it all, you know what I'm talking about. But it takes so for me and for the On the Turnbuckle Boys and for Erin Dick, that's one thing. And it's great to have vocal opposition, and we need that, especially in the media. But for Dowie has even more line. I mean, this is someone who's actually a performer in the sport, where he is criticizing the global leader in that sport. I mean, everyone, you hear about backstage people walk on eggshells when it comes to WWE, right? They don't want to upset, and we'll talk about it on The View from the WWE universe tomorrow, but, John Cena and Daniel Bryan supposedly don't want to work a Crown Jewel, which is fantastic. It's good to see talent that have the balls to stand up for what they believe is right. Even in situations where I don't believe that person is necessarily right. I mean, JBL came out and said some controversial things about Crown Jewel in support, right? And I respect the dude for sticking to his guns. It is what it is. I disagree with him. But Dowie James, I agree with Dowie on this one. And he's not a WWE contracted talent in any way, but, you got to think that being a wrestler, that's your dream. And to criticize them so openly and be like, you're doing the wrong thing, it takes an absolute heart of gold and a social conscience that is unshakable. And I just wanted to give that shout out to Dowie James. Like, go give him a follow on Twitter, @Dowie James. He's an absolute legend. And check out this match as well. I got there somehow from the match, but Dowie James and Kellyanne, incredible wrestling match. So if you're just here for the Grapps, Dowie's got you covered there as well. Speaking of Twitter, Davis Storm posted a tweet thread this week with regards to Perth wrestling and how he sees it. Perth wrestling has fallen behind. So he talks about EPW in the early 2000s and mid-2000s being the standard bearer, which, 100% they were with guys like TMDK, and their video production has always been on point. They've always been cutting edge. Perth has pumped out some of the best pro wrestlers that we have in Australia. Davis Storm himself, absolutely included in that list. And yeah, he's posted a series of tweets. I'm not going to read them all, but definitely go check out @EPW Davis Storm on Twitter to see what he has to say. Basically, he's calling out the scene for being a little bit lazy and a bit entitled. So the success, as he sees it, the success that they had in the early years of the modern era has bred complacency. And, as priorities change and stuff, it takes focus away from wrestling. And essentially, he's saying that it's slipped. And they're not at the same level as the rest of the country now when you look at things like PWA, when you look at things like Melbourne City Wrestling. At least that's what I don't think he ever called them out by name as places to look at. But that's what I'm saying. I'm saying PWA and Melbourne City Wrestling. Yeah, he's basically calling on Perth wrestling to pick its game back up and to, lift your game, show some pride, set a standard, and give back to wrestling. And he even supports the phrase, #don't be shit, and be great or be gone. I love everything about this rant. It's fantastic. He talks about protectionism, protectionist behaviors born out of fear that damage the scene. Now, I don't know exactly what he's talking about. I'm not privy to much behind the scenes stuff. I mean, I talk to a few people here and there, but I try to stay out of that as much as possible. I'm here for the Grapps. I enjoy the Grapps. I don't like it to get too political in terms of, this person says that or that. I hate all that stuff. But at the end of the day, the protectionist stuff that I see it. I see it in other scenes as well. He's speaking specifically about Perth here, and that's where he makes his home, so he would know. And I may be misinterpreting, so I don't know if this is what he means. But when I see things like talent not being able to, or feeling like they're not able to work at other companies, that bums me out as a fan, because I want the guys to be able to work wherever they can. I want the guys to be able to work 3 shows a week if possible. And at the end of the day, you may say, well, then it gives, people who have less experience less places to work because everyone's going to book the top guys. Not necessarily. That's not always going to happen because you have different spots to fill on a card. You're not going to be able to necessarily afford only top guys. You're not going to necessarily want only top guys because then who are you going to put over? You need to have, there needs to be rungs in wrestling. Wrestling has a hierarchy, at least the way I see it. And so I don't necessarily think that that's a valid criticism of that system where people can work anywhere. And I don't even know if that's what he's talking about, but he did mention that Craven, giving full credit to Craven, who stepped across company lines. And when I read it, that's what came to my mind, because that's what I see here in Adelaide. It used to happen in New South Wales. It's sort of crumbling a little bit in New South Wales. The scenes are breaking down a little and there's a little more crossover. And I think you look at Melbourne City Wrestling takes the best from everywhere. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're one of the best, you're getting in. And it doesn't matter where you trained. As far as I know, I don't know the politics, but from what it looks like, they take people from everywhere. And it's very exciting. And that's where the best wrestling is as a result. And I think that at the end of the day, you let the cream rise to the top and people work hard. They get rewarded. I just think that there's a lot to be taken. Davis Storm is an absolute veteran of this Aussie Grapps game, and utmost respect to Davis Storm, especially for speaking out, because I imagine he's going to probably get some heat for this. But he shouldn't. Davis Storm is someone we should look up to. Davis Storm is someone we should listen to. And, if he says that Perth wrestling is getting lazy and complacent, I'm going to agree with him. I'm going to agree with him overall. And I'm going to extend that call not just to Perth wrestling, but to Australian wrestling. Don't get complacent. Don't let success limit you, because it can. Sometimes success can limit you. I know that sounds weird, but sometimes success can limit you. Always be pushing, always be working harder, always be going that extra step. always be better. If you're not looking to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday, than you are today, if you're not looking to be better all the time, what the fuck are you doing? Not just in wrestling either, in life. In life. That's what being B+ is all about. That's for an entirely different podcast, I think. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to call some attention to Davis Storm's Twitter, EPW Davis Storm, and he did. He called out Perth Wrestling to pick up their game, and I've been calling out Perth Wrestling fans to pick up their game. So I'm fully on board with this, and I would love to have Davis Storm on the show to talk about it. I've sent out a message, and hopefully I'll hear from him soon. I know he's out with injury at the moment, but it would be great to have Davis Storm on to talk about exactly how he sees things with Perth Wrestling and in relation to the rest of the country. In EPW news this week, the EPW Invitational Tournament Final, which was supposed to take place November 3rd at Reawakening 17, has been postponed. Unfortunately, Taylor King, child star Taylor King, who I am a huge, huge fan of, love the child star gimmick. Taylor King, he's gone down, if you pay attention to the Twitters and the Instagrams and all that, he's gone down with a bit of an arm injury, a bicep injury. He had to have surgery, and he's been posting Twitter updates. About, he went in and the first magazine he picked up had Miley Cyrus twerking, which is appropriate for him because he's the child star. So, best wishes to Taylor King. We wish him a speedy recovery. We love his work here at the B+, and we're looking forward to him getting back in that squared circle in 2019? ? And the final has been postponed for the longest running tournament in Australian professional wrestling, the EPW Invitational. So that one's going to be, the gorgeous one, Gorgeous Gary, taking on Taylor King at an undisclosed date. When Taylor King is ready, when he's healed up, take your time, buddy, but also come back soon. We miss you already. So Taylor King, out with injury, unable to perform in that final matchup at Reawakening, unfortunately. But with that, I'm done. I'm done with the news. That's all the news I've got for you here today. That's all the headlines as I saw them. So let's cut across and have a chat with Erin Dick from Bronco Busters. We're going to talk about wrestling fandom. We're going to talk about the Divas era. We're going to talk about Evolution. Evolution is happening this weekend, and so I thought this was an appropriate time to air this interview. I sat down and had a chat with Erin a couple weeks ago, but now is the time to talk about it. So right on the eve of Evolution, now is the time to talk about it. So take it away, me. Normally, for our interviews here on the B+ Aussie Grapps episodes, we would talk to an Aussie Grappler. The one time we've strayed from the format in the past, we were talking to a promoter with Aiden from Iron Fist, but we're doing it again. We're taking the road less traveled and talking to someone who is all about walking and supporting those who walk the unbeaten path, kicking indoors, changing the world. I'm talking to a fellow self-described total fucking mark who does the journalism thing just a little bit better than I do. Writer for Vulture Hound, content producer at Sin, and most importantly for us here, the mind behind BroncoBusters.com. Erin Dick, how are you?
Hi, Greg. Thank you. That was such a warm introduction. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It's funny that it's a warm introduction because I'm freezing right here in my little home studio. I had to turn off my heater, and it's a very cold day here in Adelaide. Oh, dear.
It's getting quite warm over here in Melbourne, actually. It's quite muggy. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not sure.
You're kidding. Warm in Melbourne?
Yeah, right.
What is this?
Wild.
What is this? I was there was it last weekend? I can't even remember when it was. I was there for the Super Showdown and I got off the plane and I was like, I need a jacket immediately. Yeah. Like it was the very first thing I thought.
Yeah, I will admit it was pretty miserable at Super Showdown. So you came at the worst possible time in terms of Melbourne weather.
Yeah, well, for the actual Super Showdown day, because I got there a couple of days before, but for the actual Super Showdown day, I thought that the weather was fairly nice. It got cold up in the nosebleeds where I was, but it was a fairly nice day throughout the day.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was a good day all up, actually. I think it was a good time.
Yeah, well, look, there's a few things that I want to talk to you about here because I love your work.
Thank you.
But first, there is an elephant in the room that we have to address. So fan to fan here, I read the article you wrote for Junkie a few years ago about the modern era being the best time to get into wrestling, and you threw a bit of shade at the Attitude Era in that piece. Now, as a mostly straight, mostly white cis man, and therefore the official gatekeeper of all things pro wrestling fandom, I feel like it's my duty to ask you, why do you hate good wrestling, and are you even a real fan?
I love your attitude, Greg. Keep it up. I wrote that piece, quite a few years ago, actually. I think that's one of my first, official published pieces of work that I'd done in terms of wrestling, and I guess my very first ever, mainstream publication that I wrote for with Junkie Media. And I thought that that was just a really interesting idea at the time to tap into, because we were seeing all this change, especially like if we're looking at a WWE lens. There was just a lot of change in terms of the wrestling demographic. And there was a really clear, I guess, division between the hardcore fans who were, you know, so it's Attitude Era. And don't get me wrong, like, I definitely adore aspects of Attitude, and I am very much a historian of all eras of pro wrestling and all around the world. The Divas era in particular is one of my favorites. I think there's a lot to be said about how great the Divas era actually was, despite limitations in some regard. However, I do think that now, in terms of accessibility, is perhaps one of the best times for mainstream fans to connect to wrestling, because I guess there's a lot going on. You've got your indie darlings for the hardcore fans who are there to entertain, and then you've got your comedy acts, and I guess like that's good for the children and even family entertainment. It's just like, I feel like now we're a bit closer to the roots of what wrestling always was meant to be, like a family entertainment industry. You know, that being said, there's still a lot to be done, obviously, in terms of the political nature of what we're seeing, digesting. But yeah, I definitely stand by that segment of now the contemporary era in WWE at least being one of the best eras for a new fan to become involved. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, I when I read that, I knew immediately that I had to get you on the show, because I agree with you completely. And I get a lot of flack myself. I get a lot of flack for pointing out the flaws in the Attitude Era, like not least of which the actual wrestling was nowhere near as good as it is now. Like the actual bell-to-bell stuff. And I get a lot of flack from some people for saying that. And like, obviously, yeah, I have the utmost respect. Like the Attitude Era is when I became a fan, right? Like I was a kid watching, you know, The Rock and Austin, Mick Foley, all of that stuff. But yeah, I think it was just brilliant to see someone else who agrees that now is kind of the best time to be a fan.
I think it's a really common opinion. I don't think we're the only two in the entire wrestling world, not fingers crossed, that feel that way.
So maybe it's just the circles I run in, because I've gotten a lot of flack from people when I say that.
Yeah. No, I understand why you would, and I've definitely copped it from, like, I guess some of the hardcore fans. And I mean, in some senses, I hate to say it, but there is definitely a lot of elitism, I think, in the wrestling industry in terms of fandom. And there's kind of this nature of sometimes fans going, oh, you don't like this particular brand or this particular era, you're not a real fan. But at the end of the day, like, wrestling's for everyone, and there's a reason there's so much variety, and we're so lucky now, I think, and I think a lot of that comes down to the accessibility we have with internet. And we're just at a new untouched ground where there's just so much out there. It's almost overwhelming. Sometimes I'm just like, I can't keep up with every product out there. And there's something for everyone. Like on that point of, I guess the Attitude Era being like this holy grail of pro wrestling. If you think about that in the context of where we are currently, like just in time, everyone who is like, I guess, in the scene now and making waves and is working in the business, it kind of grew up in that era, you know, Attitude Era, maybe WCW fans. So that says a lot to what we have today. Like, there's a reason we have the product that exists today, and it's because those are the people who've carried it to here, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about women's wrestling, and you mentioned the Divas era, and you have a respect for the Divas era that not a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So in what way, in what aspect? Like, give us your pitch for why the Divas era is underappreciated.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think it's a really similar thing. Like, you say you grew up with the Attitude Era, and such is the case with a lot of my close friends. Like, I'm a bit younger than most of the people I hang out with at wrestling shows and stuff, so they were there for the whole Attitude Era, bras and panties, and like, of course, I've gone back and done my research and stuff. So I was probably, when I was at the height of my obsession fandom, like, please take me away from the screen because my eyes are turning to boxes. Like, the height of that obsession for me was probably around 2008, 2009. And I would have been like just late primary school, early high school age. So I was, guess, in the midst of kind of like diva search era. Like, one of my earliest memories of women's wrestling was maybe, I think it was the Royal Rumble 2008, and Ashley was trying to poach Maria to pose for Playboy, and Santino Marella was incredibly possessive of Maria, who was her partner at the time. And that was the storyline.
Okay.
And I guess, like, you don't really think about it when you're young, you know, like, it's just, for a lot of the time it's kind of normal, and that's just what you're being told is like the way that the business goes. And then as you get older, you obviously, I think when I first started getting back into wrestling again, which was around the time I wrote that Junkie article, I was realizing, oh, there's actually like really great potential for women's wrestling in the contemporary era. And a lot of that has just come down to the way politics have shifted in the last 10 years. Like, entertainment industries are obviously making room for equality and equity in gender, and you obviously take that side. But I think, like, if I am to reflect on the Divas era, that it reminds me of my childhood. And although there are things in that era that I don't agree with now, there are definitely elements and aspects of the era that teach me what the value of something is and what the value of that era is. And there's always the argument of, oh, they were, you know, they were doing the best with what they had and yada, yada, yada. But, like, yeah, I guess that's just about context. And you think about what they were doing. They were doing some really cool stuff. Like, I know, like, Melina was always one of my favorites. She was killer. Like, she had a great moveset and she worked hard. Mickey James, like, obviously well renowned in the industry as someone who's worked really hard to get to where she is. Victoria, one of my all-time favorites. And I guess you see a bit of a theme here where they are kind of like more technical, maybe powerhouse women. Like, even Beth Phoenix as well is one of them who I just adored. But I even loved the girls who were out there just shaking their thing and being, hey, like, look at us, we're killer. I mean, I think it's about ownership at the end of the day, and ownership of sexuality is so important to me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things too where you need the variety, right? So even when you look at men's wrestling, not all the wrestlers are, you know, I was about to say Finn Balor because I was thinking of his talent level, but then I think of his abs as well. So
yeah, that's it, isn't it? Yeah, it's funny that.
But, like, you have people who come out there and their whole thing is shtick. They're there to basically shake it and entertain in that way, and they're not there to be the pure athletic, solid, really good wrestling. They're there to have fun and let people relax for a minute. And women's wrestling has the same stuff. I've never understood the hate for all of that.
I think to turn my rant before into something that's a bit more, like, condensed, it's about that ownership of your body and your sexuality is something that was really profound for me as a young woman to be watching, like, oh, this is okay. Like, as long as it's, you know, within reasonable grounds and it's consensual and all that business, like, I think that why not? Like, why not go out there in a bikini and be like, yeah, I'm killing it in this ring and I'm doing what I love to do. Like, I feel like that's an empowering message to send to young women. Like, yeah, just owning who you are, really, regardless of who you are. And then again, like, it happens to men too. Obviously, there's the gimmick sometimes of the overt sexualization of characters, but that's what it's about, really. It's the caricature of these wrestlers. It's male, female, and everyone in between who gets affected by that. So, yeah.
Yeah, look, you talk about wrestling having, you know, changing, especially over the last few years. And a big part of that is the women's revolution and evolution, which, as people listen to this, the Evolution pay-per-view, the first all-women's WWE pay-per-view, takes place tomorrow as people listen to this. We're recording this back in time. So, but yeah, how do you feel about the women's revolution and the evolution as, like, I guess as like a marketing stick?
Yeah,
almost?
That's a really good point. And yeah, one that I feel really passionately towards in terms of, I feel like even the word evolution is something that comes from the ground up. Like, a revolution is literally something that starts from ground up and is by the people, for the people. Yeah. So I think using those terms as, like, a way to brand or market something can be a little bit cheap. But I mean, WWE have done that kind of thing in the past. You know, that's no new thing at all. But I think they've just gone ham with the women's evolution and everything like that. I guess just to put it simply, like, I'm a strong believer that there's a reason where we are today, and it's all about context, and it's all about everyone who got us here from the early days to the Divas era, all the way through to the new era. Like, there's been obstacles, absolutely, but I think everyone has contributed in some way or another to the current climate that we're in.
Yeah, and so you mentioned that being ground up, right? Revolution is a bit of a ground up thing, and WWE kind of co-opted it almost, but as far as I can see with women's wrestling especially, and I mean, all the progress that wrestling has made lately, it's been a groundswell. It started, I don't think a lot of people realize it with the whole, you know, WWE spearhead the movement, but they don't really. It's been a groundswell from the indies, from the locals, all the way up is where it started. Because, I mean, these talents have to start somewhere and they get their footing and grow. And you focus a lot on local wrestlers in your work with Bronco Busters. So I think that's a good point to transition there. Talking about Bronco Busters.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Sorry to interrupt, guys. We're going to get back to the interview in just a second, but first, just want to talk to the blokes in the audience. Let's be honest. We all want to look good. Whether we're going out to the local Grapps show, whether we're going out with friends, whatever we're doing, we want to look good. But we don't necessarily... I mean, we're not all Nikki Van Blair with daddy's credit card spending up a spree. we don't all necessarily like the shopping aspect that it takes to look good. And that's where Threadbox comes in. Threadbox is a monthly subscription box that sends personalized clothing to your door. When I say personalized clothing, I'm not talking about the weird stuff that has your name on it and says it's a family thing or whatever. I'm not talking about those things that you get on the Facebook ads. I'm talking about real personalized personal shopping experience. If you need shirts, they're going to look at shirts. If you need singlets, they're going to look at singlets. If you need shoes, they're going to look at shoes. You're in email contact with a stylist who will build a style profile based on how you like to look. I've got the fresh duds. CJ gets the classic box where you're a little bit plainer in his outlook, whereas I like to have funky patterns. And they're going to personalize that and tailor it to you and to your needs. And what's more is it's available on every budget with boxes starting from just $40. So if you want to look good with less effort and without all the pesky shopping stuff, if you want someone else to handle that for you, head over to threadbox.com.au, and because you are a B Plus player, they're going to give you 15% off your first box when you use the code the B Plus 15. That's threadbox.com.au. Use the code the B Plus 15 and get your first box today. I'm sure a lot of people in your sort of normie life ask this question, but why wrestling? Like, you could write about anything and you've chosen to write about wrestling. So I want to ask that first and foremost.
Yeah, it is 100% a question I get asked pretty much daily. Like, my parents go, why are you wasting your time this thing? Like, surely it's a phase, grow up. Like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm here now. I think I'm here to stay. I don't know, there's something just so fascinating about wrestling, just the culture of it, the societal implications of it. I mean, I don't think that there is another sport or entertainment out in either right that has had more cultural impact, and vice versa, than wrestling, than pro wrestling. Like, just think about I guess it is kind of like this cult thing, and I guess some people don't like to use that term, like it's a cult thing because it makes them feel a bit isolated. But I mean, why don't we own that? Because, like, it's just, I love it. I love it with all of my heart. And most wrestling fans can't really tell you why. The usual answer is like, the storylines, the characters, the athleticism. Those are the standard answers that you get, I guess. But it's more than that. Like, it's a feeling. It's definitely a feeling that, whether it's you're watching it on TV and you're there in the moment as the story's unfolding, and there's so many layers to unpack. Like, there's what's happening in the ring, there's the characters outside of that, there's the extra context of the running storylines, there's the world that they exist in. It's just like this meta art form. And then when you're at a live show, you have that whole element of, you're in a crowd of strangers, yet you're all invested in the same moment and you're watching it scene by scene unfold. It's just, I don't know, there's nothing that compares to it. And I stand by that. All my muso friends, like, I love live music. Live music is one of my other loves, but God, nothing will ever compare to wrestling. Never.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm right there with you, obviously. I get the phase thing too, and I'm like, I'm 30 years old. How could you call it? Like, this is a long phase. It's a long phase to go through.
Yeah.
But with Bronco Busters, I guess that's the newest, because you've it's not your first foray into writing about wrestling. You've written for quite a few places. Vulture Hound, of course, as I mentioned in the intro. Junkie, we talked about. I think you wrote for What Culture as well for a while.
Yeah, brief stint with them. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but Bronco Busters is different because you're kind of focusing on representation. And specifically queer, LGBTQIA, and female-identifying individuals' voices that traditionally have been left out of the discussion in mainstream wrestling coverage. And I feel like there's probably a significant portion of the wrestling audience who don't necessarily understand why there are calls for better representation and highlighting of minorities. So why do you think representation matters?
I think it's something that I am so passionate about in every aspect of my life. Being a media person, I write, I podcast, I do the radio, I do a lot of media content creation, and I guess the thing that fascinates me most is human stories. That's what I'm really about in everything that I do and everything I create. So, I mean, you said it. It's that kind of, we've heard so many stories before that are similar, and they come from that one source. They usually come from the stereotypical male, white, cis, straight man, especially in wrestling. But there's a reason that is. Like, if you look historically, wrestling kind of was born out of this, like, it was the entertainment for the working class. And because of the carnival culture of it, the nature of that, you have the freak shows who are the entertainment, right? And the freak shows are the queers, or the women who are out there with bras and panties. Like, that's That wasn't that long ago, but that's something that exists way back, way back. And it's not wrestling. Like, I guess that's something that the entertainment industry is really becoming conscious of. And it's just like another slow burn change in society. Like I just want to be someone who can help get new stories out into the world, and especially about something that we all really love, and for an audience who want to hear those stories, who are interested in wrestling, or maybe even people who are new to wrestling and just, again, like me, want to hear some human stories that they haven't heard before, the stories of people who have historically, I guess, been pushed to the side for someone else. Yeah, I think it's just, for me, it's about reprioritizing who it is that we listen to, and again, having diversity is the best thing we can have in human history. Like, if we have a plethora of stories, then life might not be so boring.
Yeah, right. And look, I can from personal experience, I can speak to the pushback, because there is some pushback sometimes, and I never pushed back in wrestling, but when similar sort of, I guess, identification and political issues popped up in some of my other fandoms, like comic books or gaming, right? Like, I'm really open with my fans. I supported Gamergate, but it's one of those things. I looked at it when it came to wrestling, and I looked at it and I was like, why aren't I feeling the same way as I did with the comics and with the and it came down to that phrase, wrestling is for everyone, right? And I took a look at it, and I was like, when I looked back through the history of wrestling, it wasn't necessarily like that, and I kind of realized that. And as a person, so I feel like a lot of the pushback comes from people because wrestling is for outsiders anyway. Right, like you get a lot of crap for being a wrestling fan sometimes, like in the regular world, and wrestling is kind of for people who feel sort of pushed to the side already, and then when a new group of people come in, like, hey, we've been pushed to the side, and can we hang out here too? For some reason, those people get angry, like, no, this is ours, and I kind of realized that I was doing that, and so I've made a concerted effort to be like, no, we're not doing that. That's ridiculous. Like, this is for everyone. And it was really that wrestling is for everyone, because I was like, I feel so accepted here. Why would I want anyone else to not feel accepted here?
Again, I think that's such an important just thought. Like, it's such an important pillar of the way that we start thinking about the way we act at shows and the way that we just even talk online and talk in person about wrestling, because we want to keep it open for everyone. Like, I think so with Bronco Busters, I think the launch of Bronco Busters, or at least the early conception days, kind of coincided with my sort of queer awakening. So I kind of came out as bisexual around a similar time when I started doing Bronco Buster stuff, and then it just added that extra layer of like, it's something personal to me, like it was my baby, because it was representing, I guess, it was for me and it was for everyone who is like me, and then I want to share that with everyone. Like, my partner who I'm with currently, like, knew nothing about wrestling, which is really funny. He's a guy who grew up in a household of 3 older brothers, and like wrestling was never something he was exposed to. And I came along and like introduced this thing into his life, and he's just like bewildered by it, right? Like, it's it totally captivated him. And I think it just comes down to the fact that there's something in it for him. Like I guess just the macho masculine violence wasn't something that he was into, and that's what always deterred him from pursuing it and for even just checking it out. But when he realized that there was so many other elements to it, and then like another step further, started taking him to live shows, and as a big music fan himself, and as like someone who participates quite heavily in the local music scene, seeing this whole other thriving local scene, where especially women were kind of topping cards and were important. Like, everyone there respected them, and they were important to the scene. That was something for him where he was like, I want to be a part of this. I don't really know what it is yet, but I know I want to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's a great feeling. Yeah. I think for the most part now, I think wrestling fandom is starting to catch up and catch on, especially with, women's wrestling has come a long way. There's still a lot of work to do in some areas with representation, with queer communities and people of color specifically, when we talk WWE especially. Yeah. It almost feels like a majority of the fan base are on board at this point. Would you agree? Like, that's how it feels to me.
Look at the mainstream exposure that Australian wrestling specifically has had just in the last couple of months. It's insane. It's so insane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I think the world's just being flipped on its head right now down under. Like, everyone's eyes are on us, and I think there's definitely people that I'd like to like shout out to that. A lot of my female and queer peers, like, Rebel, a good friend of mine, has been doing great work with ABC with that podcast that came out. Clem Buster, great writer who I've always looked up to. Like, there's so many people I would love to shout out, but I think it's just the nature of this communal effort that we've all kind of pulled together. And hey, we're here. We've got a new story to tell. I think that's the Australian way, to be honest. Like, especially in wrestling, we've kind of just been pushed to the side for a really long time.
Yeah.
And there's so much else happening elsewhere in the world. Like, female indies have been thriving, like Rise and Shimmer and all the rest. Like, Stardom. Like, there's so much happening in the world that it's like, oh, how can we keep up? But Australians are like, we're gonna just squeeze everything that we know into this like amazing melding pot of talent, and we're going to showcase it, and we're going to be heard. Like, that's what's happening right now. Australian wrestlers and the talent and everyone behind it is going, that's it. Like, we're done waiting now. It's our time. And I love that. Like, we're just taking over. It's so cool.
Absolutely. I think Australia has something special to offer wrestling because, and I've talked about this with a couple of wrestlers too, about our country being, you know, obviously there's still its flaws, but being probably the most successful when it comes to multiculturalism, because Australians would just sort of like, yeah, have a fair go. You know, it doesn't matter. And yeah, we've that melting pot. It really, and our wrestling is a real good example of that. Like, it sounds weird to say, like, wrestling is a real good example of the multicultural experiment working in Australia, but it kind of is. There's so much different influences and everything all melting together to make it special.
Yeah. Well, like you say, I think, you know, I like to be idealistic for the majority of it, but I mean, we obviously still have a lot of work to do. Australia still does have quite an embedded problem of racism in a lot of aspects of the country and in a lot of our attitudes. And yeah, just a lot of other issues, homophobia, one that comes to mind. I think, like you said earlier, like, wrestling is for the outsiders. We're kind of the people who haven't necessarily gone with the flow. We didn't steer to the conservative direction. I think there's still a few who might hide behind their keyboards, but like, that's just the nature of the internet age that we live in. And I think the power of the masses is going to be something that we should all be watching out for, because like, we're all, like, as I said, we're not holding back anymore. Like, we're just seeing so much change in the world that we're in now that it's like, it's inevitable. It's totally inevitable that the people who have been behind the scenes for so long, or been working so hard to be seen, are going to get noticed. Like, just by default, a lot of the people that I've interviewed on Bronco Busters have been people of color. And I don't know that was necessarily something that I consciously set out to do. Consciously in mind, I wanted to speak to women and I wanted to speak to queer people. That was set in stone. But just by default, I think the stories that we don't hear enough are the ones that are more interesting. Like, Erica Reed is my idol. Like, Erica Reed is one of the most amazing women I have ever met in my entire life. And her story deserves to be heard, like, 1,000,000 times over. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, Justine Collar is someone else who's doing fantastic in her field. And she's bringing skills from outside of the industry that, you know, we might not have had before if people like her didn't suddenly catch on to this weird, wacky world that we call pro wrestling. Like, it's time to open it up. It's totally time to open it up. And we're only going to grow and get better.
Well, that's the thing with the Aussie Grapps scene as well. The women behind the scenes, as you mentioned, Justine and Ree, of course, over in Melbourne City Wrestling, like, they're instrumental to the growth. And so having an outlet where they're being highlighted, and because obviously, I mean, it's one thing to highlight the performers, but then to also peel back the curtain and be like, oh, hey, look, you wouldn't love this thing you love as much, or this thing you love wouldn't be as accessible, or, you know, without these women that are working hard behind the scenes as well. So it's really great work that you're doing. I'm a big fan. You very focused on Aussie grapplers and grappler adjacent peoples, but is that something that you plan to stick to, keeping it Aussie, or can we expect to see like a Jordan Grace or something similar show up in our Bronco Busters feed?
Yeah, look, I would really love to expand one day beyond our borders. Absolutely. I think the focus will always be women, queer, POC, but yeah, like, why not? Let's take over the world. Let's take over. For me, I think it's not, at the moment, it's not about readership or numbers for me or anything like that. If I get, like, if the person I write about is overwhelmed and touched that someone would actually want to hear their story and share it with the world, that's enough for me. Like, if I get one comment on a story that says, great read, really want to go see this person's work now, I want to go check them out at a local show. If I can get like one extra butt in a seat somewhere in Melbourne or in Sydney or anywhere in the world, like, I'm winning. I'm totally winning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, with some of the interviews that you've had, something that has come up a few times, and I want to get your opinion on it, because this is something that, even though wrestling fans tend to be on board with progress. We're kind of a punk rock community for the most part. This is something that's quite divisive. I'm talking about intergender wrestling. Now,
love it.
You love it? There we
No,
go.
I love that you brought this up. Go, hit me with your question.
So you've interviewed Riley, who's a big advocate for intergender wrestling. It came up in your interview with Vixen as well. So I just want to know, how do you feel about intergender wrestling? There
was a great story that came up based on that podcast that we did with the ABC. They spoke to Madison Eagles, who is pioneer in our industry on multiple levels, not just in women's wrestling. Kellyanne, of course, who is just like on fire. I cannot wait to see what she does in the next few months. It's been an exciting time. And also Erica. I think a lot can be said as to why people are anti-intergender, especially if we can, continue to look backwards. Historically, the way that intergender was acted out wasn't always for the best. But wrestling's not real. It's not real. At the end of the day, wrestling's fake, right? You should be able, as a fan, to come sit in your chair and just let go of any issues that you might have about how the outside world works. You sit down, and if it makes sense, physically, you can see that a man and woman, or whoever it is in the ring, they physically match up, or there's some element, like maybe the woman is a bit quicker than the man, she has to get around him. If there's an element of the psychology or physicality that you can put that barrier aside just for 5-10 minutes for how long the match lasts, there's nothing wrong with it. I guess the argument is it perpetrates means for domestic violence, or it encourages domestic violence. They're not the same thing. They're so not the same thing. Domestic violence is a completely different issue of power and control, and it's a real life thing that a lot of people face every day. Intergender wrestling for a lot of people is an escape from that, right? Because as Riley said, it was her means to escape or make sense of an abusive relationship that she came from.
Yeah.
Because it's not real. We have so much scope and ability to do whatever it is that we want within wrestling. With so many stories we can tell, we can totally go against the grain and shift the dominant narrative with what we've got. So why not?
Absolutely. I mean, look, no one bats an eye when Black Widow takes down 100 Hydra agents in the Avengers movies.
Totally. That's the best example.
It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. Yeah. So I just wanted to. Did you see Triple H's comments on intergender wrestling, saying that it's just for shock value?
Yeah, I saw that, and I mean, I don't know. Hunter and I aren't getting along mentally right now. I don't know. I think
it shocked me because his whole work with NXT and
I know.
I was like, I didn't expect that coming from him. But okay.
He's been saying a few funny things lately, and I'm like, I don't know what you're thinking, pal, but that's okay. You keep doing it.
I guess the last thing I wanted to ask you about is your interviews with, because we're running out of time. We've gone over time already, but your interviews tend to be very personal as well. Is that a conscious choice where you want to really peel back the skin, or is it just something that kind of happens?
Oh no, it's definitely intentional. I'm a sucker in stories, as I've said before. I want to get to the root of what makes you tick. You know what I mean? That's what I want to know, and that's what we all want to know, really. I'd love to do some more mental health focused stories as well. I spoke to Michelle K. Hasluck a little bit about that, and it's just something I'd really love to do a bit more and get more personal with people and keep talking about those things. I just want to know what gets you out of bed in the morning. That's what we all want to know, because sometimes we need to hear that. Just away from wrestling, just in real life. Yeah. Sometimes we need to know what makes other people tick, what makes them get out of bed. Because sometimes you need that extra push. You need to hear someone else's story to give you that extra help that you need. And I mean, it is a little bit self-indulgent of me. It has been a bit of an excuse to get to know these people that I've looked up to for so long, and that I really admire. But I think that I definitely make an effort if I can to go out for coffee with someone, and then just get to know them, or if it's a phone call, I try to make it as personal as I possibly can. It's definitely a conscious effort of mine, because I just want to get to know people. That's what I'm about. I just love listening to people and hearing what they have to say.
That's awesome. And for the people who want to get to know you, where can they find you online on the social medias?
Yeah, awesome. Well, make sure you head over to Bronco Busters. It's broncobusters.com. Broncobusters.com domain is currently occupied by someone else who I've been trying to track down for the last 6 months and say, give it to me, you're not even using it. So we're trying to get that up there. But anyway, head to the site on Facebook, just go at Bronco Busters AUNZ. And we're on Instagram as well at Bronco Busters AUNZ. And my personal Twitter, where I am constantly pushing Bronco Busters stuff, is at EzTweener. That's EZ Tweener.
Awesome. And can you give us a little inside info? Who's coming down the pipe? What interviews can we look forward to if people subscribe?
Yeah, totally. Well, this month I have an exciting one coming up with the infamous Kelly Skater. We'll be chatting about her career before she hung up the boots. And I got a few more in the works, but I don't want to reveal too much. But if you have any requests, I'm always taking requests from readers and fans who want to see their favorite wrestlers profiled. So yeah, just send me a message or comment on a Facebook post. I'm pretty quick to respond.
All right. Thanks a lot for joining us, Erin.
No, thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it.
All right. So there you have it. Earlier in the show, I went on a bit of a rant about how great of a human Dowie James is. And Erin's going to be up in that category as well. Love talking to Erin. And she's also been very vocally opposed to the Saudi Arabia Crown Jewel show and on Twitter as well. Easy Tweener. Definitely check out her stuff. Bronco Busters does very, very important work. And on top of that, on top of how important the work is, the articles are super entertaining. So she's got one coming out soon with Lena Cross. She mentioned there we have one coming up with Kelly Skater. Very exciting stuff. Bronco Busters doing amazing work. Not only is it important work, but it's very, very entertaining. It's always a good read. I really loved the interview she did with Vixen. Really loved the interview. All of them have been fantastic. There hasn't been a bad one yet. My girl, the Samoan diva, Jason Dewhurst, did an interview as well. Coined 2018 the year of the gays. Definitely head over to bronco-busters.com and, hit the subscribe button or whatever you need to do to get that into your news feed regularly, because you will not regret it. She's one of the best people in the country covering Aussie Grapps, which is what it's all about. But she's not the only one covering Aussie Grapps. I'm not the only one covering Aussie Grapps. There are other podcasts just like this, where you can listen to interviews with Aussie Grapplers and Grappler-adjacent peoples. This week in Aussie Grappling Interviews, Encore and the Fudge sat down with Kyle Fletcher. Check out the link in the show notes to listen to that interview. We also have B-plus favorite, Tough Stuff Ricky South, that new orange ring jacket and ring geared. Man, he looked dreamy on Colosseum. I loved it. And he had sat down this week and did an interview with Wrestle Radio Australia. I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but basically as soon as I finish editing this podcast, it's going in the headphones and I'm going for a jog and listening to some Tough Stuff Ricky South. And also, on the turnbuckle this week, the boys sit down and talk to the player, Jake Lindo. And look, Brent, so the episode isn't out yet, so I reached out to the other turnbuckle boys and said, who you got this week so I can give you the shout out on the show. And Brent is not one to oversell anything, but he called this a must listen. And he's never said that to me before. And like I said, anytime he doesn't oversell, at least in my experience. When he tells me something, he tends to be really accurate and really specific and always on point when I get around to it as well. Always on point, and everything he has ever told me, I trust this man. And if he says that the interview they did with Jake Lindo is a must listen, then I'm going to call it a must listen as well. I will be listening to it when it comes out, so make sure you subscribe to On the Turnbuckle and have a listen to their interview with Jake Lindo. But that does it for this week in Aussie Grappling Interviews. Thank you so much for listening to ours. Now it's time to hit you with what's happening this weekend across the country, starting right here in my home state. Pro Wrestling South Australia present War Games on Saturday night at the arena in Paraka. Hype Beast Lil Onyx takes on Zane Zodiac. Veterans Club meet the Academy and Twisted Black in a Battlefield Rumble. Acid Hayes and Jason Crash go one-on-one, and Matt Hayter defends his PWSA championship against Melbourne's Richie Taylor. Tickets for that one start at $15. Down in Victoria on Friday night, BCW 24 takes place in Burwood East. Vance Adams and Cletus meet in one-on-one action. Melina takes on Erica Reed. The Preston Kindred face off against the Brat Pack. Dowie James and Mick Moretti go one-on-one, and in the main event, Mad Dog defends the BCW championship against Jurassic Punk Sid Parker. Tickets for that one are $40. I know I like this section to be kind of like an ad for these guys and give them a shout out and say go out and check out the Aussie Grapps, and I believe it. Definitely go out and check out the Aussie Grapps, but at the same time, BCW, $40, what are you doing? $40? I mean, that's almost the price of World Series wrestling tickets, and you're talking about one international versus a million internationals. Now, I love the roster that you guys have, but $40? I don't know. Pay attention to the market, guys. It's a little bit steep. Saturday night at Southeastern Entertainment Centre, PCW present Halloween Horror. Be there if you dare. Tommy Hellfire takes on Luke Sabre. The Brotherhood meet with Charmed. Lucas Daniels and Nate Cross face off in no disqualification action. Edward Dusk and Cass Stone face off for the Ignition Championship. And A 20-man Royal Rumble will determine the number one contender for the National Championship. Tickets for that one start at $20. Up in New South Wales, Friday night, IWA Fallout takes place live at the Wests League Club. Turkish Delight will call out his attacker. The Style Boys, Will Keatis and Brad Alexander, take on Tree Hugger Lucci and Kai Drake. The Beach Bum Buddha Jackson Kelly goes one-on-one with Party Boy Jax Jordan. And Jonah Rock defends his IWA Heavyweight Championship against both Chris Abbott and Randall in triple threat action. Both of these former tag team partners and best friends, Abbott and Randall, they've both cashed in their fighting spirit favors to get this match. They received those as a result of winning State of Origin, but can either one topple the big man, the king of monsters, the IWA champion Jonah Rock? You have to be there to find out. Tickets for that one start at $14. On Saturday the 27th of October, Newcastle Pro Wrestling will hold their 7th anniversary Halloween show at Charlestown Bowling Club. Juan Direction take on the Velocities and a mystery partner. I'm going to assume it's going to be Matt Diamond. I don't think it's a mystery anymore. Matt Diamond has joined the Velocities, and I assume he's going to be the third man for this match against Juan Direction. Dazza will get his hands on Headhunter Rig after being taken out of the Rumble match all those months ago, and JT Robinson will choose an opponent with his career still on the line. But if he wins this one, the career-ending stipulation will be lifted. Mick Moretti and Tough Stuff Ricky South get their hands on each other in an I Quit match, and Social Media Squad and the Babes will face off. Of course, we can't forget about the main event. Newey Pro Rumble winner Jackson Kelly gets his title match with Full Force Matt Rogers. Will he win the title and rename Newey Pro to Manly Pro as he claims he wants to do? Again, it's one of those things you got to be there to find out. This will be available on PWA Play at some point in the future, and their turnarounds have been fantastic. But for now, if you want to find out, you need to be at the show. Tickets for that one start at $10. On Sunday night, AWF Wrestling is at the Nineveh Club. Albie and DJ Sonic will defend their tag team titles against Abaddon and Mr. Mortis, and much, much more. Tickets are $15. Also on Sunday, CWA return to the Canley Vale Hall in Canley Vale. Dean Draven goes one-on-one with Jake Gibson. Ryan Miller versus Alex Irvin. 5-Star Flash defends his CWA Heavyweight Championship against JT Robinson and Tough Stuff Ricky South, and much, much more. Tickets for this one start at just $7. Up in Queensland on Saturday night, Venom Pro Wrestling take over the Showman's Guild of Australasia in Brisbane for High Voltage 3. Rip Riley takes on Mitch McCarthy for the Origins title #1 contendership. Dallas Summers takes on Cobra and PJ O'Connor. Anti-Venom and the Night Terrors go at it in tag team action. Tim Cade and Flashman clash over the VPW Championship, and Jackson Cross defends the Origins title against Lynx. Once again with Venom Pro Wrestling, I could not find ticket price information. It kind of sent me in a little circle on the Facebook from one page to another to try to find ticket information, and I couldn't find it, so I gave up. Venom Pro Wrestling, you need to be clearer with your ticket pricing. I'm sorry for being so critical, but I gotta say it. Yeah, I need to know how much the tickets are so I can tell the people. The people want to know. In Western Australia on Saturday night, New Horizon Pro Wrestling Telethon doubleheader Trick or Treat takes place at the Wentworth Parade venue in Perth. That's 2 shows. It's a doubleheader for the Telethon cause at 2 p.m. and another at 6:30 p.m. Only a few matches announced. You gotta assume it's gonna be a huge card because there's 2 shows, but only a few matches have been announced as of right now when I record this Thursday morning. There is a Disney Rumble on the first show, and on the second show, there are 2 Survivor Series matches taking place, and of course, Lena Cross defends her new Warrior Rising Championship against Melbourne's Avery. That's definitely one to watch. Lena Cross and Avery is going to be a fantastic match. And finally, in Aussie Graps, over in New Zealand. That sounds weird to say. Saturday night in New Zealand at the Corinthian Centre in Invercargill, Southern Pro Wrestling present Halloween Haunting. T-Rex takes on Shane Sinclair. As I mentioned in the news, Adam Brooks will defend the MCW Intercommonwealth Championship against JK Moody. The Hooligan Marcus Cool, who you may have seen at MCW, you may have seen at PWA, this is his home promotion and he's going one-on-one with the Falcon Kid. And Will Power defends the New Zealand Heavyweight Championship against the Southern Rumble winner Kane Khan. This match is a year in the making. If you want to hear more about it, check out Last Word on Pro Wrestling. They did a written preview. That's at lastwordonprowrestling.com. Always great. Lance Larson does a preview of this entire show. So if you want to find out more about it, click the link in the show notes that I'm going to put there just for you. And if you're in the neighborhood, get on down, check out the show, send us your thoughts, let us know what you think. We definitely need someone to help us cover New Zealand Pro Wrestling, and if you feel like that might be you, get on down to this show, let us know what happens, and reach out and let us know. We'd love to talk to you. Tickets for this one start at just $10, and that does it. That's this week in Aussie Grapps. Thank you so much for joining us on this wild ride in this wonderful world of pro wrestling that we love. Make sure you get out this weekend, head to one of these shows that I mentioned, and support your Aussie Grapplers. Buy some beer so the venue's happy. Buy some shirts so that the wrestlers can eat. Do the thing. Do the thing. Boo the bad guys. Cheer the good guys. Get out there and do whatever you can to support Aussie Grapps. I am at Greg Unchained on Twitter, at the Greg Unchained on Instagram. We collectively are the B Plus Wrestle on Twitter because wrestling wouldn't fit. The B Plus Wrestling everywhere else. Make sure you check us out. Give us a 5-star review if you feel so inclined. And as always, thank you so much for listening.
Hold one. Arm drag.
You're not doing this. Get out. Let me tell you a personal story about Vince McMahon.
You just made the list.
So, no speak English.
Dummy.
Goodbye and good night.
Hold two. Arm bar.
This is the worst town I've ever been in.
It's still real to me, damn it. Dummy.
Hold three. The moss covered